Well, it's really great to be here. I've been tormenting myself about this presentation. I give, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 sometimes presentations a year. But for some reason, this particular topic, this idea came to me sort of as a result of going to the Reboot conference. And I think I've revised this presentation maybe 20 or 30 times. I just feel like I never get it right. And last night in the bar, after some very inspirational discussions with people, I forced myself to get up early this morning and changed it all one more time. So it's all brand new. I've never done this talk before, but pieces of this, I think, are going to be familiar to any of you who have read anything I've done. Why am I here? It was nice to be in the other room and see the sticker for my blog on Felix Peterson's Mac. That's kind of nice, my blog message, where I've been writing for just a few months. I've been writing for a long time, and I'm now the founder of a brand new consulting firm called Blue Whale, about which you'll probably hear more in the future. We don't even have a website up yet, so it's totally brand new. Back in 1999, I wrote an issue of what was at the time an electronic newsletter called Message. I was writing about a company that actually was acquired while I was doing this review by the New York Times. And I was struck by an insight into this technology I was looking at. It almost doesn't make any difference what it was. But the thing that happened is I realized that the terms I had been using to describe these kinds of collaborative tools, these collaborative technologies, really didn't get to the heart of what was going on. And so I coined the term social tools because it seemed to me that what was going on in that particular tool and others that I've seen, many others I've seen since, is that unlike technologies that are really designed to manage information, that particular tool was really trying to channel culture. It was trying to shape the culture in the organization or in some group of people. So I've been wrestling with this topic for over 7 years now. And so the question for me in this particular talk, if, in fact, these technologies that we're using, these social technologies, and I'm going to zoom into a bunch of them later on, if they, in fact, shape our culture, and they are, in fact, shaping our world, the question for us is, what kind of world do we want? What kind of tools should we be using? What kind of tools should we not be using if, in fact, there's an inevitable impact on us, our social relationships, and ultimately culture and the way we live in the world? Well, one of the things that I think has happened on a very global level is that the internet is becoming, the web is becoming a third place, replacing third places that we used to use in the days before the internet. And the third place, that's a term that comes from a sociologist named Ray Oldenburg. He pointed out that people have three primary places in their lives. They have home, where they see their family. They have work, where they see the people that they work with. And then there's the third place, which is the local cafe, or the local bar, or the library, or wherever it is you hang out. And it's a place that's neither home nor work, but someplace else. And some of the benefits, one of the obvious benefits of a third place is it's a place where you're not necessarily with your family or the people you work with. You're with this other group of people. Often people that you don't know as well, and you aren't known as well, and you're exposed to very different perspectives as a result. You might be sitting in a bar chatting casually with someone who has very different perceptions and viewpoints than you, a different educational background, different nationality. And as a result, that's a very broadening thing. Oldenburg and then others, like Robert Putnam, point out that it's through these kinds of looser connections, what other people call weak ties, it's one of the most fertile places to find work or a future mate, or someone to date. So it's a very rich thing to have. And the horrible reality is that the rise of television over the last few decades has led to a complete movement away from the third place. People spend less time at the local cafe. They spend less time in bowling leagues. They spend less time in the PTA. They spend less time in any kind of social involvement. There's staggering numbers. I mean, when I did some research on this a couple of years ago, it's a little out of date, but it's interesting. Americans average 4 hours of television a day. Now, just because you're Europeans, most of you are Europeans, don't pat yourself too hard on the back, because it turns out even French people who complain the most about Americans watching television are relatively close to that. I love this. The average 16 to 30-year-old in England lives in a house with 5 television sets. Amazing. Macedonians are the highest consumers of television in the world. 286 minutes of television a day, and so on. Anyway, I love this universal. The more channels that are available, the more television people watch. Okay, so this is bad. You know, television is a disease, because it leads people to sitting passively on a couch, having information pushed to them, and they're really not engaged with the television even, but definitely not with other people. So as a result of this, there's less entertaining going on, people are less involved, they're less likely to play games, they're less likely to hang out. But the light at the end of the tunnel is the internet. Aren't we happy? It's wonderful. 56% of people in Europe who are broadband users said they were spending a lot less time watching television since they got broadband. And so this is basically the advent of a new third space. People aren't going back to the corner cafe. They're not going back to the pub. But they are moving away from television. And they are going onto the internet. And they are using, increasingly, highly social tools. That is, technologies that allow them not just to search and say, I want to buy a pair of shoes or something, but to allow them to engage in various kinds of social interaction with people around various things that they're interested in, whatever they may be. And so this is all driven by the fundamental nature of social groups, the way that people interact with each other. This is a little diagram that was really based on some kind of email analysis, but it doesn't make any difference. There are consistent patterns about people's social interactions in the real world and on the virtual world that we see time and time again. That does not mean, however, that all social systems online are equal or are equally good. And so my agenda today is to say, if we know this transformation is happening, and we know that these tools impact us and then wind up reflecting in the culture that we live in, some of these things might be better or worse for us. And I have some very strong opinions to share with you, so bear with me. Email blows. Email is a terrible mechanism for what we theoretically think we want to use it to do, but it's constantly thrown into the discussion of things that have had a big impact on culture, and it really has. There's some goods and bads to email. Well, first of all, the way that email works makes it extremely easy to do things like spam. That is, to send a blast email out to dozens and dozens of people and treat them in a completely homogeneous way, when in fact, that's not generally the way that we think about the world. We have different kinds of relationships with different people. But it's very easy. How many people here mistakenly CC'd somebody on an email message that you really didn't want them to see, and they wound up seeing it, and it turned out to be a big mess? Maybe everybody, right? So the good news is, increasingly, people are using less email. I mean, we all know we have lots and lots of email, but proportionately, we are spending more of our time communicating through social mechanisms and less in email. How many people use instant messaging all the time? Yeah, everybody, right? It's a much better mechanism. We'll talk about that later. But the reality is that email has had an enormous impact, especially on the world of business. There are some people who theorize, and I go along with this, that the entire re-engineering movement of the late 80s, early 90s, and so on, was ushered in because email existed in the company. It was possible to get rid of 2 or 3 levels of middle management, because the reality is you bring in something like email into a company and the communication channels immediately change. And a lot of people had their jobs of passing information up and down in the organization would just obliterate. The need for those jobs went away. At any rate, younger people use email less than older people. And if you get into the American teenagers of 13 to 19, they view email as a corporate tool of propaganda. They do not want to write or read email. They're happy to text you. They're open to instant messaging. They use it all the time. And they read each other's blogs or live journals or MySpace pages. But they really don't like email. They think that it's a corporate evil. It's really sort of an amazing thing. And so the implication of that is in the future we'll see significantly less email, and people will be switching more and more to other mechanisms. Instant messaging. The buddy list is the center of the universe. Amazing shift in just a decade and a half from functionally no instant messaging to nearly everybody who has a computer and is wired, is online, has instant messaging open. I think the Nielsen numbers are the average AIM user has instant messaging open 5.5 hours a day. There's something like 3 billion messages that go through the AOL instant messaging system each day, and that's just AOL. So this is an amazing shift. I'm a tremendously strong advocate of the social cues that instant messaging brings to us. I can remain aware of the comings and goings of my friends across the world simply by listening to the little chimes going on and off. I know that Ewan Semple has logged in, and I can eye him and say, hey, what's up? He lives in England. I mean, we see each other only really at these conferences, but we remain in relatively frequent communication because of that. So this is an amazing humanizing feature or technology that cuts across time and space. And it's going to increasingly be a centerpiece of all these sort of social technologies. All the other things I'm talking about build on that and maybe in fact incorporate instant messaging along with the other features that you see. Now, all of these things are sort of happening at once. Blogging has come along and it's had an enormous impact. The biggest impact, I think, has been felt in the United States in honestly the dissolution of the traditional media market. You may not be aware of this. I was having this discussion with some other folks yesterday who are European. They're not aware, but the New York Times, which is the premier newspaper in the United States, has laid off 400 people so far this year. The newspapers in America have lost approximately 30% of their advertising revenue in classified advertising in the last 18 months. It's a dotted line going like this, headed for the bottom. And that is primarily the result of the rise of blogs as an alternative mechanism for people to find authoritative and, in some cases, better researched information than what is being developed by the traditional news media. So that's an enormous shift, and if you follow the dotted line, I think it was William Buffett, the investor, the second most rich man in the world, was quoted a couple of weeks ago saying, "The newspaper business is dead and they just don't even know it yet." So this is a profound impact on traditional journalism, and there's a whole number of questions. I won't go. This is not about journalism and the impact of blogs on journalism, but it's changing what's going on in the States, and I believe this will trickle through the rest of the world in due course, maybe a few years later. But the rise of blogging has had enormous impact there, but it also has an impact at the individual person level. An individual communicating with their friends by posting pictures of their vacation and so on. And the opportunities to make new friends, to participate in that third space online when you don't belong to a bowling league anymore. The rise of things like tags, which is a way for people to participate, to create what some people call gestures that can be shared on the internet, and basically come up with shared meaning. And it could be anything, but this just happens to be from Yahoo Groups. It could have been, I could have done some Flickr, which is the example I've been seeing all day in other presentations. But this allows people to pivot on a topic, and perhaps through that discover somebody who's an interesting person who has, like you, been to Lisbon, Portugal before, or somebody that's interested in blogging, or somebody who likes to talk about knitting, or whatever. And this is an amazing collection of technologies that, is shared by a wide collection of technologies. Explicit social networks, like MySpace. In this case, I'm putting up Last.fm. How many people use Last.fm? Yeah, it's not surprising. Phenomenally interesting. It builds on, in the newest incarnations of this, it builds on the blogging metaphor. It supports tags. So all of those metaphors of social interaction show up. But this is a community based on the love of music, basically. And I found out by using this that I have the musical taste of a 27-year-old British woman. Go figure. And actually, I met a couple of, this is her right here, Martha Lamb. She's the person on the Last.fm site that has the most similar musical taste to me. And now we're friends. It's just an amazing thing. And it's really about discovery. A lot of people are going to MySpace because they want to hook up. I'm going to Last.fm because I want to learn more about music, but I'm perfectly happy to meet people, and it's very interesting that the virtual neighborhood of people with similar musical tastes is handed to me. And is the fundamental mechanism of discovery. It's extremely social. Geolocation, Felix just gave a talk, but he wasn't really talking about this, but that's what his company does. And this is places. This is interesting. I took this picture this morning and put this on here. That's me. Right there. It's sort of at an angle. You can see that's my head. Somebody took a picture over there this morning associated with this location on Places, which is a system that allows people to say, here's where I am based on the Wi-Fi location that I'm in, the Wi-Fi router ID. So here's a bunch of photos that people have uploaded. You can use this tool to say, who's around me right here in downtown Lisbon? And I use this tool a lot to discover that my friends are actually in town. Oh, it's Felix Peterson in San Francisco. Let's get together and have a cocktail. So this is one of those great capabilities to bridge from the virtual world, and this information on the web, to real-world activities. Where are people in the world, and can I get together with them? Really fascinating. And of course, that leads into the notion of globalization. These kinds of technologies can work. This is an international product. Anyone can use it anywhere. But the meaning of what's going on, these photos at SHiFT, are really of interest primarily to those of us who are here or people elsewhere that really care about what we're doing here. So that combination of a global world and a global technology and the shared meaning of a smaller group of people in a smaller social network, those of us who care about SHiFT, that's something we're going to see time and time again, and it's an element of hope for me about the way the world can get to a happier and less dangerous state. Meme trackers. This is really one of the few things I'm going to talk about in a really strongly negative sense. This is tech meme. How many people know about tech meme? A few. Just a few techies in here. Okay, so tech meme is a site that uses an algorithm, that uses programming to look at what's being said by, in this case, the 5,000 most prominent tech bloggers. And it keeps track of the links between just that subset of the 5,000 tech bloggers to see what are the hottest things that they're writing on, which would be perfectly benign because that's an interesting thing. Everyone would be interested. But the problem is, the tech bloggers themselves are looking at what's being aggregated at TechMeme, and they play the game of jumping on the hottest stories to try to build traffic to get more people to come to their blogs. And as a result, you have this piling on phenomenon where all the people get on all the hottest stories, and what we have is this clustering effect, where instead of having 500 stories that are of interest today, relatively quickly it gets narrowed down to 50 that everyone is writing about. Now, I think that's a bad thing, honestly. I think it's a dangerous thing to do because we're talking about less things, and we're all starting to echo each other. We're all talking to each other and not to the rest of the world. And so I think this is a bad kind of social model, right? That you can create this feedback system with a program, and then the tech bloggers or the political bloggers and so on, there are others of these meme trackers, can in fact steer people's the whole dialogue away into a smaller number of stories instead of a bigger number of topics. I'm not even tracking the time very well. How much time left? Oh, perfect. Perfect. So, I think if we look at these kinds of social technologies as a group, there are certain characteristics that are starting to emerge. And we can, as a result, imagine that this is the way that web culture is going to seem in the years to come. And then I believe, honestly, that web culture will have a huge impact on world culture secondarily. It's going to be participatory, not passive. We're not going to sit and be watching television. People are going to be involved in communication with networks of people through these kinds of tools, through blogs, through instant messaging, through social networks. Even the act of going online to buy shoes in the future will not really be like a catalog search. You'll be reading some blog of some person that you think has really good style sense, and they will make a recommendation about Cole Haan shoes. And you'll be able to buy those shoes right there. You will not have to leave the context of that person's blog. Even commerce will be fully socialized in the future. But you'll participate in that. You won't be passively being a passive consumer. Overwhelmingly, these tools are open, not closed. They open the doors to anybody to come and get involved. And as a result, it's inclusive, not exclusionary. That's another reason that I don't like the TechMeme model, because that's an elite collection of authors who are being invited to participate. And aside from the feedback loop, it's closed, not open. It's exclusive, not inclusive. The power is moving from the center to the edge, across the board with all these technologies. The power of blogging is not just that there is a handful of A-list bloggers writing. It's that there's a long tail of millions of people blogging. And as a result, the organized, centralized media organizations are losing control. And once you put power in the hands of the people at the edge, it's unlikely that they're going to allow it to go back to the center. So, we are making these social tools. They are going to have a huge impact on us. And as individuals, we can have an impact on the direction that the tools are taking by which ones we choose to use and the kind of feedback we give to the tool makers. So if in fact you believe that there's some element of a social system that you're using that you don't like my arguments about TechMeme, complain. Complain. Take your message to them. Say that I believe this is not helpful, this is taking us in the wrong direction. Or simply don't use the tools that you think have elements that are potentially negative. That's the control that we have as users of these tools, as participants, to help steer the discussion and steer the direction of the tools themselves. Thank you.
We have time for a quick comment, a quick question.